You might have heard the EFF saying it'll be the first party to reveal its private funders. This coming after that vote in the National Assembly giving the thumbs up to the bill Lindsay was telling you about that will see or compel at least political parties to keep record of their private funders and make them available to you and I, the voting public. Let's talk more then about this and also speak about his call for more legislation to clear up the lines between NGOs and political lobby groups. Joining me is political analyst Ralph Mateka, who's in studio tonight. Ralph, a very good evening to you. I want to begin then with this vote in the National Assembly. Now political parties will be compelled to disclose private funders who give them anything above the 100,000 rand threshold. There had been resistance. Finally a vote. Should we expect them to be as transparent as they should be?
Well, I think that today is quite a very interesting day. It's a milestone in a sense. You correctly state there that there's been resistance. I mean, if there is anything that actually unites South Africa's political parties, despite differences in terms of political conviction, it's they are united in their resistance to actually disclose. And they have been over a period of years. And that is why it took a court litigation to get to this point. So I do think that what we are seeing today, it is a step in the right direction towards transparency. But we also need to understand as well that the situation, the political process, the institutional mechanism around political parties has also advanced. And South Africa's politics has advanced to a point where we should think about wider reforms. We should not limit it to just disclosure by political parties. Now we are talking about something that we never thought was an issue, the internal party finance. I mean, we have seen it with the ANC, the CR17 campaign money, raising concerns that that's a lot of money and the legislation doesn't get to that point. So we should see what is happening today as the beginning of a bigger electoral processes reform in South Africa. I mean, there are a lot of issues that are not answered here. How do you deal with independent candidates and so forth? You need a broader regulatory legislation. You also need some regulations to be able to look into a set of behavior. This is just the beginning. And I think that now efforts should be in place to ensure that the necessary regulation to guide the day-to-day disclosures, how often should it be made and so forth, I think to guide political parties, because this is a new area, I think we need to get those processes underway so that we can guide parties to do that.
You have written about another area that you think is worth investigation. This is the NGO sector and think tanks, for example, that are masquerading to some extent as NGOs but are in fact political lobbies. How big a space is that? Have we fully explored it?
Well, it's a very sensitive area in South Africa. I mean, I've worked in the NGOs and I've stated in my article that my first job was with an NGO. And I do understand that majority of NGOs in South Africa are pursuing public interest. There is no doubt about what are their intentions and so forth. But there is this new area that is coming out of lobbyism, where actually an organization or maybe an institution or even a group of people, they can come together and they, out of a funding, they can get a funding and pursue a particular political goal within our process. They can defeat a legislation, they can push for a legislation, they can actually even influence the outcome of internal result of a political party.
I'm thinking of the IRR with the DA now.
Exactly.
Recently.
That's the elephant in the room, where Musimai accused the IRR of being a lobby or of playing a lobbyist role. But in our laws, we don't define that. We don't draw the line between what does it mean to be a lobby group that is in pursuit of a particular goal versus an NGO that is in pursuit of a public interest and a wider interest. We don't have laws. We don't even have tax laws that govern them differently. And I take a cue from the US system here that I observed as a system. In the US, a lobby group is governed by a particular laws. And once you are a lobby in the USA, you work in Congress, you lobby for a particular interest. Could be the tobacco, could be the sugar, could be whatever. Could be
the National Rifle Association in the United States is quite clear about how
you can even lobby against land reform if you want. But in the US, you are not allowed to join Congress for a certain amount of time. There are clear regulations where you don't confuse lobbyism and actually what is happening in public office. Remember, the reason why we are concerned about this is the relationship between our lawmakers, our political parties, and the voters. It should not be infiltrated by the pursuit of interest group. But we don't have any regulation on this.
Then, Ralph, because we're chasing the clock here, and talk about why organizations like the Institute of Race Relations, which we know had made comments about Mayimane's leadership, and a few weeks later he was gone as DA leader. Why is it then that organizations that wield that much power clearly internally in a party resist the tag of a lobby group? Why don't they want to be called that?
It's being seen as a pejorative term in South Africa to be referred to as a lobby group. It's like you are a special interest. And once you accept that you are a lobby group, it means that you no longer have that wider representation in terms of the goals. The only organization that is proud, that I've never had them disputing that, it is actually AfriForum, the most honest organization. They lobby and they do that. IRR is not happy with that. I don't think they are happy with that. They see themselves as a public interest organization. But yet, in terms of the law, one can say that me referring to them as a lobby group is just operational. There isn't a legal definition in South Africa that says you are a lobby group, you are a non-profit organization, and you are governed by this set of rules. It's an area that is not regulated, and with money becoming influential in politics, we are going to see the work of lobby groups if you haven't started seeing them already.
Let me ask you then the question of benefit. What's in it for these organizations? Why are they so interested in the policy and in particular the leadership of the various political parties in this country? Is it purely a money thing?
It is to sustain a political agenda, and political agendas are usually intertwined with the money as well. You find out that when you start looking at the funding stream of organizations, that's one of the issues we need to openly talk about. We are a democracy. You start looking at the funding stream, you start looking at the political agenda that are being pursued. You find that consistency where certain leaders are identified as pursuing a particular agenda. And this is very much important because it's happening in Europe. It's not a South African phenomenon peculiar. It's happening in Western Europe. It's happening in the United States, where money is beginning to influence politics in a manner that we need to draw the line about the organizations that operate in our society.
Given then the 3-year-long battle to try and get our political parties to agree to disclose people who make donations to them, the private funders, and your suggestion that we need to push for more legislation to clear the line between lobby and NGO pushing for the benefit of the citizens, how likely is it that our MPs would actually support such an idea, because they don't want that level of transparency as we've seen with the funding bit?
Certainly, that initiative of talking about lobbying and so forth, it will not be popular now. Now, the main thing now that we think we have done very well is just a mere disclosure. But the reality is that whatever we have achieved in disclosure as to who fund political parties, it might not be so effective in bringing about better political system if we do not do certain things. That is why my view is that we might have not thought about regulating lobbyism far back. We might have not thought about regulating internal funding of parties. But where we are, experience is such that we cannot turn a blind eye on those things. We need to say that what we have achieved now, the struggle to get a mere disclosure, will amount to nothing if we don't regulate lobbyism within our politics, if we don't regulate internal party funding. Maybe another issue might come out that I've identified with other political parties, that sometimes parties can receive funding in kind from other parties outside. I wrote an article a week ago where I've said that the DA was receiving a fund from a Danish political party associated with centre-right politics. Those are things that we need to be looking at, that it might not be only cash. Money might be given in kind. Our laws need to step up to that. And electoral reform, in my mind, you never come to an end. You constantly reform to maintain dignity within your system. That's
Ralph Mateka, I don't see South African politicians or political parties rushing to be top of the line as far as internal transparency, especially where money is involved. But for now, thank you so much for coming on.